This video discusses the use of microcredentials to enable the NZDE Civil to be used in a more flexible and focused response to industry requirements. In particular, it would make it easier for learners to work in the industry and study part-time, would allow students to focus on a particular role in industry so they can more quickly become useful members of the team, and to make it easier for us to credit prior learning to industry people entering the NZDE program. The aim of the video is to give you an idea of how microcredentials could help us develop the NZDE program in the future, and also to inform you of a pilot project that I'm presently running with funding from the TEC. The pilot project website is at Microcredentials Online, which is shown on the slide there. You'll be able to access all of the uh, content except for the quizzes. So microcredentials, for the purposes of my presentation and my study, are recognitions of small packages of learning. They are competency based, so each microcredential recognizes a specific competency, such as being able to produce a construction drawing, or being able to plan an earthworks project, or being able to test earthworks. So based on small competencies, which makes them quite short. The micro-credentials I'm looking at are 3 credits or smaller. They're online and on demand. So as we'll discuss later, the content and the assessment is online, and people can access it whenever they like. So if you go to our site, that'll give you a pretty good idea of what a micro-credential site would look like, only a bit bigger. Also, if you go and have a look at the EduBits site, that is also a really good example of what a micro-credential site looks like. They're flexible, which means that students can do them in any order within reason. Obviously, there are some competencies that need to be learnt in a sequence, but where possible, we want the students to be able to get in there and do the learning that they need to learn for that particular thing, which means that the required maths and physics and any other background information within reason is embedded in the course, or there are links provided so that they can learn that information as they go. Uh, and they're stackable, which means they can be arranged. And so that's the main thing that a micro-credential or competency-based micro-credentials bring, is that they can be stacked into different arrangements, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Before I go on and explain that, I just want to point out that the micro-credential definition that we're using here is different from what the NZQA has come up with, and different from the micro-credentials that are on the NZQA's framework. Theirs are integrated packages of learning, and they are much bigger than the ones we're talking about. The phrases differently, but the NZQA micro-credentials actually fit into what we're proposing quite well. So first of all, talking about the stackability of micro-credentials, they can be aligned to formal qualifications, and that's what we're doing in this pilot project. We've taken the competencies which align with the learning outcomes of a specific course, and we've arranged them into 5 micro-credentials which align to the learning outcomes of the highway engineering course. So you can take those competencies and align them to the learning outcomes, and then stack them up to uh, make it so that someone has actually done all the learning required and developed all the competencies required for an NZDE course. So we're aligning micro-credentials to a formal qualification. Now, obviously, you can't do this for the whole NZDE. There are some courses that need to be big and long, especially at the end. You need that big 15 credit project. You need some of those second courses like GTEC 2 and stuff like that, which require the students to um, do a much larger body of work. So we're really only proposing it for maybe half of the NZDE at most. The other thing that micro-credentials could do is align to industry requirements. So we've got these micro-credentials which are aligned to the competencies that a civil engineering graduate has to have from the studies we've done. And we're saying, well, you can take bits and bobs from each one of the different courses and put them into a package. So, for example, you might have an industry role of someone that's a site engineer for an earthworks project. And so they'll be pulling micro credentials off the geotech courses, off the engineering management courses, off the construction practices courses, uh, and they'd be pulling it together into a package of learning that com uh, encompasses all of the competencies that one would require to do an earthworks um, project or to manage an earthworks project. Don't ask them to do engineer roading design. They haven't done that learning. They've developed the competency in a particular role. Likewise, you could do the same for someone saying doing subdivision design. You're pulling competencies from uh, the the drawing programs, from the highways design programs courses, and things like that. So you can mix and match them to provide industry requirements. And the career arc there might be that someone sort of goes straight into industry, develops competencies in a particular role using the NZDE aligned micro credentials and develops a core competency where they're useful to industry. And then they grow those competencies, they move into design, they move into management, stuff like that, and they gather these things together until they've got, you know, a significant part of an NZDE, and then they can make the decision to go on to a polytech and finish off their NZDE and get the qualification. So that's a possibility and something that maybe we should be thinking of. So here's how it might work. So here's four NZDE courses. Well, construction practices isn't one, but it should be. Hopefully you're considering that today. Um, and so someone new to the industry comes in and they would in January, and they might think, well, we'll get them to do the engineering management, the construction practices overview, and road basics. They're coming onto a road and construction site, and so they're just getting a basic understanding of how the industry works and how a roading project works. And then February, March, it might be that you're doing the earthworks, you need them to be doing soil testing. And so you get them to do those two courses, earthworks and soil testing. Then you're moving on to, say, building the road and stuff. So they're doing civil works at the same time as they are working on a civil works construction site, which makes the learning all that more productive. And as you see, it varies. So when they have time, they try to knock off two or three in a month, although that's probably a bit optimistic. When they don't have time, they put it to one side, might do one a month, or they might not do anything if they're really, really busy. So the flexibility of micro-credentials means they can pick it up, do a micro-credential, and then put their study to one side when work starts getting really busy. When things start calming down a little bit, they can spend a little bit more time on their studies. So there's more flexibility, which is really what working people need to be able to engage and study. Notice also that they can study content that is applicable to what they're doing at work, which means that it just helps them to learn just that little bit better because they can see the theory in practice, which is a very useful way to learn. So the way we're proposing to do this, and the way that most people run these things, is that there is a free online platform. So there's what we're proposing is that and that's what that microcredentials.online thing is, the free online platform. So what it does is it has the online resources. The online learning is free. Uh, so people can come in and pop in and learn something, and if they feel that they want to go further with it, then they can move on down the process. But first of all, we're trying to get people in there interested in engineering. Also in the online platform is submission requirements, how you demonstrate your competency, because that's what a micro-credential is. It is a recognition of a particular competency. So you either If you don't have the competency, then you do the study using the online resources to get you up to that level where you do have that competency, or you may already have that competency. In either case, you demonstrate the competency, and the submission requirements gives you a good idea of how you can do that. Then the submission is submitted and it's assessed. Now this is the point where the learner would pay money. They pay money for assessment. They are not paying money for access to the learning materials. Um, and then it would be assessed by an ITP tutor. Um, and if it's found that it meets the submission requirements, then there'll be the verification step. And this is where there's a face-to-face interview, either on Skype or in person, which is recorded. And this is where the person shows they actually know what they're talking about, that they didn't copy it, that someone else didn't do it, that that it's them. So it's videoing, it's showing them talking, their face talking, showing the knowledge, which is much more, which is what we need to do. We need to make sure that the system can't really be played, that you can't subcontract out assessments, which is sort of becoming quite common practice. I think that this face-to-face interviews are going to become more and more part of the education landscape, to avoid that the cheating that we're getting at present. If they are able to demonstrate that they do have the competency, they do have the knowledge, then we'd award the micro-credential. Now, we're not doing this for the project, but eventually it would all be packaged up into one digital file, which is an open badge. And an open badge is like a digital badge that you can access online. If you push on it, then you're going to be able to get access the file, which is the submission requirements. You'll be able to access the demonstration of competency, what the learner actually submitted to demonstrate their competency. And you'll also be able to access the interview, the video of the interview showing the learner demonstrating their competency in that particular thing, and obviously the open badge. So that's all packaged up into chain block, which means it can't be forged, and means that an employer can click on it and verify that that it is actually the person in front of them, and that they do actually have that competency. So the pilot project is to develop and test the effectiveness of online learning resources, online development platform, the delivery platform, and an assessment system. So that's what you'll find if you go to www.microcredentials.online. And it's to develop an understanding of the effectiveness of the approach, potential users, the potential uses, potential funding, and industry interest and views. We're still looking for participants. We have Downer. We have about 6 people from Downer involved, and 1 person from outside, but we don't really have many participants, which is a bit of a worry. So if you know of anyone, more than happy to talk to them about being involved. But we are learning quite a bit already about how these things could develop, and any new technology does take time to gain some momentum. So we are aware of that. So what it is if you go to the online course, you'll see that we've got the roading systems, hopefully the road earthworks and the road pavement micro-credentials are all up. The road drainage and the road maintenance will follow in the next month or so. If a student finishes all of those micro-credentials, demonstrates competency in all 5 of them, then they will be able to come to Unitec and get cross-credited or recognition of prior learning of DE 5204 Highway Engineering 1. If other techs are interested in being involved in this, then we are more than happy to include them in the project as well. We are keen that it's not just a Unitec project, that it actually extends out over as many ITPs as possible. Thank you.